Welcome to Cinemaholics. I'm John Negroni, and we have some pretty interesting breaking news here that I am very excited to talk about. Now, a lot of you have probably been wondering, when are we actually going to get new Star Wars content on the big screen? I know, of course, we have talked about and we've been anticipating the Mandalorian movie that they're going to be making. I forget when the release date is for that one. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's the only sort of major theatrical release that Disney has been hyping up. There have been a lot of other things that have been in the works that are being produced and developed, including the Taika Waititi movie, and there's still the Rian Johnson trilogy that might happen once he's done with the Knives Out films, and so on and so on. But we now have confirmation that the main canon of the Star Wars movies, a new trilogy as part of the, I want to say, normal episodes. So basically episode 10 through 12 of the main Star Wars saga is officially going to happen. That is the news anyway coming out of Deadline, and I'm also seeing this being reported in the Hollywood Reporter. So let's talk about it. Let's break this down. And the big news here is that Lucasfilm actually has a writer and producer on the horizon to take this on. And that is Simon Kinberg. Now, Simon Kinberg, not exactly a household name unless you're in the film world. If you're in the film world, you know Kinberg quite well. He's had his hand, particularly in writing and producing a lot of films, particularly the X-Men films. If you don't know, here's your crash course on Simon Kinberg. He has been working on a lot of films since the mid-2000s. I think his first one was one of those XXX movies, but he also was a writer for Mr. and Mrs. Smith. He came onto the X-Men scene with X-Men The Last Stand. Not the best thing to start off with. That was the Brett Ratner one that came after X2. But after that, he worked on a few things like Jumper, Sherlock Holmes, and he also was a producer on X-Men First Class. He was a producer on Days of Future Past as well, and he was one of the writers for Days of Future Past as well. He's had plenty of misses, don't get me wrong. Things like Let's Be Cops, Elysium, This Means War. I think he was a producer on Cinderella, so he started to get into the Disney world around like 2015, and Chappie after Elysium. So not exactly the best track record, but also some great stuff in there as well. The Martian, he's pretty well known for helping spearhead Deadpool in 2016 to its huge success. He also was a writer-producer on X-Men Apocalypse. I mean, they had him on the X-Men docket, all right? He was a producer on Logan. He was a producer on Deadpool 2. Now, he didn't start directing movies until 2019, which was the release of his directorial debut the same year that he actually left Fox. It was, of course, in the sparks of the Disney buying Fox deal. So he's now kind of more in, he's not with Disney fully, but this is a sign that he is kind of moving back into Disney while still kind of being a free agent for the most part. But yes, he did direct Dark Phoenix, considered by many people to be one of, if not the worst X-Men films, quite honestly. Maybe up there with, for example, X-Men Origins Wolverine. And he wasn't done yet. He was a producer on The New Mutants, which also crashed and burned back in 2020. And he got another shot at directing and writing with The 355. This was that movie with Jessica Chastain. Did not do so hot. It was a January release. People barely remember it. But he didn't go away. He was a producer on A Haunting in Venice, and he went on to produce that F. Gary Gray movie this past year called Lift, and he also was a writer on The Killer's Game. He worked on some early rewrites for that. He's been a creative consultant on a bunch of Star Wars movies. He got a special thanks in Rogue One, A Star Wars Story. He was a creative consultant on Star Wars The Force Awakens. And he also wrote, I think, a few episodes of Star Wars Rebels. He was one of the creators of Star Wars Rebels. And that was kind of back, I want to say 2014. That's really his entryway into Disney, actually, not Cinderella, because I'm forgetting that Rebels technically came out before Cinderella in 2015. And he's worked on a bunch of TV stuff like Designated Survivor and Legion. The guy has been around. He's one of those guys. I remember that show Invasion came out. He was a writer on that. That was kind of hyped up for him. And he's been around. He's had a lot of shots. He's not exactly somebody like when people see his name, they immediately go like, now I'm excited. He's a British kind of producer, filmmaker at this point. And I guess what they're trying to do with Kinberg is turn him into the new Kevin Feige, but for Star Wars. It does look like Kathleen Kennedy, for, her sort of role, the Star Wars stuff has really wound down at this point. And it looks like they're, looking at Kinberg as possibly, this is me guessing, being somebody who is going to develop these things. I understand Kathleen Kennedy is also producing this as well, but we can speculate all day on the politics of that. So yes, looking at the news here, I'm looking at the Deadline article, and Lucasfilm has closed a deal, they say, with Simon Kinberg to develop a trilogy of Star Wars films. He's going to be writing the trilogy and producing them, like I said before, with Kathleen Kennedy, who is still the chief of Lucasfilm. And so this will apparently be episodes 10 through 12. And that said, it's looking like this will not be a continuation of the Skywalker saga. It will continue the storyline, but it's going to begin something kind of just new. And I did mention before, there are other Star Wars projects with James Mangold, I think even Donald Glover as well. He, of course, if you recall, played Lando Calrissian in Solo, A Star Wars Story. And otherwise, we're not getting a ton of other details on how this is going to work. There are rumors that Dave Filoni, who has worked with Kinberg, because like I said, Star Wars Rebels, Dave Filoni was a big influencer on the Rebels stuff, as you saw in Ahsoka for sure. It's looking like maybe this could be Kinberg's entryway into making a movie, quite possibly. But yeah, Kinberg seems like a very interesting choice. And I know a lot of folks have been wondering and speculating on really whether or not, we can get a new trilogy anytime soon. It did feel like in 2019, same year as Dark Phoenix came out and Kinberg left Fox, that was the year that The Rise of Skywalker came out. A lot of folks were disappointed in that movie. It did not do very well in the box office, and honestly, for good reason. I think that movie just felt a bit aimless in terms of what it was trying to accomplish. It did not feel like that was a cohesive trilogy. But that's the thing with this news that I am feeling good about. And that's the fact that it does look like they are relying on one person who has a track record of producing a lot of films within one continuity, that being X-Men, giving him the task to develop just a trilogy. Not 7 movies, not 10, but just 3 movies. This isn't a Marvel project. He doesn't have to be Kevin Feige in that way, in terms of like the Marvel stuff. But just starting small with, let's do 3 episodes, and we're going to have one person overseeing it, rather than having, okay, let's do one with J.J. Abrams, and then let's do one with Rian Johnson, and then Colin Trevorrow, never mind. Now it's going to be J.J. Abrams again, even though that wasn't the plan from the beginning. That was the big thing that a lot of folks, myself included, just did not appreciate about the new trilogy, episodes 7 through 9. And that was how disconnected they were from each other. I maintain that I'm a big fan of The Last Jedi. I thought that was really well done. Part of the reason I think it worked as well as it did is that, well, it kind of did a lot of the things that Force Awakens wasn't able to do right. But at the same time, I think a lot of folks were also kind of curious, what if Force Awakens had been J.J. Abrams' thing moving forward? If he had done the next 2 movies and he had really mapped things out, you might second guess whether or not Abrams would have done that effectively, considering that, yeah, he's great at starting things and not always the best at finishing them, looking at things like Lost, for example, but that's fine. I think that Kinberg, by contrast, I think that even though he hasn't proven himself to be a capable director quite yet, and quite honestly, he has proven to be a good writer. He's written some good stuff, and he has been a producer who's gotten things done in a big way. So yeah, I'm looking at some of the comments too on this, and there are people who are confused, which I'm not confused. This does make sense. Kinberg does seem like a smart choice, maybe a good choice on paper. I think what I'm confused about is really the vision that they have outside of this trilogy. It feels like there are so many things going on in the wider Star Wars realm that they just don't know what to do next. I do think that the failure of The Acolyte, for example, a show that I kind of liked. I thought, I know a lot of people hated that one, but I thought it was pretty interesting, actually. That definitely showed a lot of dysfunction, though, behind the scenes, and a lot of course correction and Disney just going back and forth on their strategy. That was the thing that was frustrating about all that drama, in my opinion. And There's somebody else here who's saying, like, can we stop giving Kinberg high-profile genre projects? Like, why is he the guy to get endless chances? And I get that. I do. I mean, we kind of went through it, right? Like, he has certainly not proven to be he's not exactly somebody who inspires a ton of confidence, especially if you've been following his career for a long time. But I feel willing to give the guy a chance with this because I do think a lot of the issues that have happened a lot of it did come down to Fox. A lot of it did come down to Bryan Singer. A lot of it came down to Brett Ratner. A lot of it came down to Avi Arad and all these people. And there aren't that many things where I'm like, yeah, this is clearly a failure of Kinberg. Except I think that, yeah, he just hasn't directed good movies, but that's not what this job is, right? This job is to kind of make these different movies connect and to tell one story. At the same time, he's not exactly the best at that either, but I think people did really like Star Wars Rebels, and I think that's really what they're looking at. They're not looking at all the X-Men stuff, I don't think, as much. I think they really are taking a look at how Rebels was pretty successful and how it did revitalize a lot of Star Wars content kind of post, the Clone Wars stuff in a way that was very compelling for a lot of folks. So I do get it, but I'm not that enthusiastic. I'm not like, oh, yes, heck yeah, can't wait. Somebody wrote, going from JJ to Kinberg on not one but two Star Wars franchises, and look how that turned out. If the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, then we are truly in the asylum. I think that's a little dramatic, honestly. I think that's a little bit of like, okay, but are you aware that Rebels was pretty successful? And that is, that is a case where it did turn out. And so I would be a little bit more hesitant on that. At the same time, look, a more fair criticism, in my opinion, would be of Invasion. That wasn't a very successful show, right? I think that that's fair to say, too. But yeah, for the most part, these comments are pretty negative, but I got to be honest, I'm not quite as negative. I get where these folks are coming from. It's Star Wars. It's going to elicit a lot of negativity kind of just by design. That's how these things typically work out anyway. But yeah, I think a lot of these people at least are not really going to be happy unless, they really just change everything with the Star Wars stuff and start from scratch. And that's obviously not going to happen. And yeah, so people who are expecting that are going to have to keep on expecting for the time being. So yeah, I'm looking at the Hollywood Reporter story as well. They have their own sources on this story. They're saying that their sources are saying that there are going to be brand new characters. It's going to be a new story, not necessarily be a continuation, which is interesting. So I think the implication could be that it's not a continuation of the Skywalker stuff in the sense that we're not, doing the Darth Vader or, Anakin. Like, we're not doing any of that stuff anymore. But there could still be like the same characters. It's the same timeline. C-3PO could show up or something like that. Who knows? But I'm sure a lot of people are just sort of like eager for something original that doesn't just call back all the time to what happened before. That's been the persistent criticism of these Star Wars movies, is that they rely so much on nostalgia that they just, ultimately aren't able to capture new, audiences. And that's been something that's been sorely missing. And, and the thing that has been kind of working for Star Wars has been when they branch out, when they had, that first season or so of Mandalorian, which did feel different. It was Star Wars, but it was like a different perspective on the Star Wars galaxy. And people really liked, Grogu, the Baby Yoda character. It felt, different. It was obviously a familiar story structure. It wasn't super original or anything like that, but it was original for Star Wars, I guess. And they also do bring up, and I had heard about this, but I didn't want to say anything in case I got this wrong, but he is about to go into production on a movie called The Running Man for Paramount. This is a Edgar Wright's remake of The Running Man, which is a Stephen King thing. So yeah, I'm not sure if he directed that or if he was also like writer or producer or something on that as well. Not clear here in the article, but that is also worth bringing up, that he has that coming forward as well. They do also bring up, I totally forgot that David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, the guys who did Game of Thrones, technically still have a trilogy that is supposedly maybe going to happen, but I don't think that at this point is going to happen anytime soon. I think that's just another one of those scrapped things that we won't hear about it ever again, quite possibly at least. Hollywood Reporter brings up something I forgot, which is that we do have another Star Wars show coming, really in less than a month. December 3rd, we're going to be seeing Skeleton Crew, which is going to be on Disney+. And I don't know much about it. I did see a poster, and I'm hoping that it's, going to be another kind of Star Wars thing that just tries something different. It does look like it's going for maybe something that's more focused on being an original story. Something like Andor, for example. I, like many other people, really enjoyed Andor and really how fresh that show turned out. So anyway, that is the news. That's our new Star Wars trilogy, unless something changes. I mean, let's be fair. I think that we are used to getting these promises of like, oh yeah, we're going to do a totally new Star Wars thing. Rian Johnson's going to make 3 movies, and then we don't hear about it for years and years. I think the big difference here is that Simon Kinberg is not Rian Johnson. He is a producer at heart, and I do think that he's someone who, say what you will, gets things done. And also the fact that these are going to be new episodes of the main Star Wars storyline. I think that's a bit different from being like, oh yeah, we hired these guys to make something totally new. Who knows if it'll happen, because we don't know what kind of movies those are even going to be. But in this case, there is a lot more built-in momentum for a new sort of inline trilogy. Episodes 10 through 12, that's no small thing, right? This is hearkening to the original stuff. So for that reason, I do think that there's going to be more of an appetite to make this, to get a lot of people hired for it. I think it's going to be probably more streamlined of a process than we've seen before. But that's just my guess. When it comes to Star Wars, it's really, really hard to predict where these things are going to go. It changes all the time. People change their minds. I think that there's been, like I said before, just so much dysfunction at the high level in terms of, these Star Wars projects actually getting off the ground and being made with the people behind them, the creators, the directors and everything, totally getting their vision out. And when it does happen, sometimes you do get something like The Acolyte, which they got their vision out, all right? And a lot of people were not happy with it for various reasons, some of them unfair in my opinion. But what are you going to do? That's Star Wars. It's just something where I think we've learned at this point, don't get your hopes up with Star Wars. But hey, don't rule stuff out. I'm always of that attitude. If I'll watch something like Book of Boba Fett, can't stand it, but I'm like, I'll watch something else. Sure. Okay, I couldn't get into Obi-Wan, but that's fine. There'll be another Star Wars thing. Maybe that'll be better. It maybe not. Who cares? If it's better, that's great. If it's not, that's fine too. It's not a franchise that I personally regard so highly that everything that comes out in it has to be amazing. I still have the stuff in it that I just really like and I'll go back to on my own. And yeah, I'm content in that way. So, all right, well, that is the big news. Let me know what you think of the new Star Wars trilogy. What would you like to see happen in the Star Wars trilogy? That's something I'm going to be thinking about as well, trying to figure out, okay, what do you do in this universe that's next? Is there any expanded universe content, comics and things that could be an interesting path forward? How far in time do you jump ahead for this one? Do you jump in time at all? Let me know what you think, and hopefully we can get some more details on this soon. All right, bye everybody.